All right. So while I have titled this one "The Sheep and Goats Judgment," that's not specifically what the question is, and we'll see here in the first slide. Something was asked, but I titled it that, so that'll be the bulk of the bigger passage of scripture we'll look at, and I imagine we'll be interested enough to talk about that. And then there's a second question which we'll deal with after we deal with this one. So essentially, there's a couple passages that were brought up. One is in Matthew 10, verse 42, and whosoever shall give to drink unto one of these little ones a cup of cold water only in the name of a disciple, verily I say unto you, he shall in no wise lose his reward. And there's an equivalent in Mark, which we will see, but I didn't put it on this slide. And then the passage, I guess you can say that's being compared to Matthew 25, verse 35. For I was an hungered, and you gave me meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. So we will look at the larger context around these. And for the second one, that's the sheep and goats judgment. And we'll look at the entirety of that. It won't take too long to talk about it. But I'll say while there is some similarity in these two, they're really talking about different things, and we'll go through it and get your perspective on it, and you can get your 2 cents in and maybe even reframe the question. So what we want, well, we're going to need some context around these in order to avoid this. So 2 Peter 1 verse 20, knowing this first, that no prophecy of the scripture is of any private interpretation. The basic point there is we don't want to take verses, just on their own. We want to see what the context around them teaches. And there are a lot of passages that do have commonality, and they might have commonality more so in a verse than in a whole context. So it is still possible to have some similarity here. And I will say, I think there is some similarity or commonality on one level, but not in the larger context. So we'll talk about that as we go. All right, so this is the slightly larger context. And let me pull up Matthew 10 here to see what kind of wonderful titles they put around this. So this was verse 40 to 42. So this is where in Matthew, this is where the apostles are commissioned and given their instructions. And then quite a bit further down, it's really at the end of the chapter, you have these 3 verses here, which we'll talk about. And the title says rewards, and I think that's fairly appropriate. And, there's obviously a lot of stuff going on in that whole chapter. But let's read what these verses say. He that receiveth you receiveth me, and he that receiveth me receiveth him that sent me. He that receiveth a prophet in the name of a prophet shall receive a prophet's reward, and he that receiveth a righteous man in the name of a righteous man shall receive a righteous man's reward. And whosoever shall give to drink unto one of these little ones a cup of cold water, only in the name of a disciple, verily I say unto you, he shall in no wise lose his reward. So I'm not going to go into a deep analysis because I didn't prepare one, but just wanted to see what this passage had to say. And basically it says we're talking about a reward here, giving water to someone. And I'd say that's basically providing a need, and that will be rewarded. But what I want to look at is what's the context of how this is presented. What's the situation that Jesus is talking about? So before I go further, I guess I'll leave it open to questions or comments before I expand on what's around this verse. And if there aren't any, I will proceed. All right, so as I said earlier in this chapter, Jesus has sent forth his apostles. He has disciples that follow him, and now he's chosen 12 in the first few verses of the chapter. And then this says in 5 and 6, these 12 Jesus sent forth and commanded them, saying, go not into the way of the Gentiles, and to any city of the Samaritans enter ye not, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. My point here is that Jesus is in this chapter, it's early in his ministry, and he is commissioning the apostles to go to Israel only here. And what we're going to see in the sheep and goats judgment, this is very much a thing involving the Gentiles. But let's see more here, and then when we see both passages, we can talk about them. A little bit further down in that chapter, still way above the end, it says in verses 11 to 15, and into whatsoever city or town ye shall enter, inquire who in it is worthy, and there abide till ye go thence. And when ye come into a house, salute it. And if the house be worthy, let your peace come upon it. But if it be not worthy, let your peace return to you, and whosoever shall not receive you, nor hear your words, when ye depart out of that house or city, shake off the dust of your feet. Verily I say unto you, it shall be more tolerable for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than for that city. So we will see some other verses in this chapter, but essentially we're talking about as the apostles go out and interact with the people, they're going to travel quite a bit and they need to stay somewhere. And so the whole idea is if you're received, bless them. If you're not received, do some bad signs of shaking the dust off your seat. We would think of something dirtier today, but I'm not sure how insulting this thing is, shaking the dust off your feet, but I'm sure a Jew would not take kindly to it.
Well, what it probably means is that, yeah, I want nothing more to do with you.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
just how nasty that is, I don't know, but I don't think it's meant to be pleasant. All right. Further down in the chapter, I left the verses that we're talking about up at the top just so that you can be reminded. So verses 16 to 18, behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves. But beware of men, for they will deliver you up to the councils, and they will scourge you in the synagogues, and ye shall be brought before governors and kings for my sake for a testimony against them and the Gentiles. So we have Gentiles mentioned here, but I'm going to put that in the proper context after a few more verses. But the point is, Jesus is sending the apostles out, and some of people are going to receive them, and some of them aren't. And I think that's what you're going to get into concerning this reward up above, how they're treated, and whether or not they're going to be taken care of. I didn't show all of it, but they're told what to take with them, and they're not going to take much with them. The idea being they're going to be taken care of as they go. You're going to have faith in God that He's going to provide, and He's going to provide through the people here. It's not going to be raining manna, or it didn't rain manna during Jesus's ministry. All right, verse 23, this is an interesting verse that most people don't get about Israel's commission. But when they persecute you in this city, flee ye into another. For verily I say unto you, ye shall not have gone over the cities of Israel till the Son of Man be come. So they are given a commission to go to Israel, but Jesus is basically telling them, you're not going to finish with Israel before I return. And of course, this is before the kingdom has been rejected and the dispensation of grace has come. Obviously, the apostles will be dead when the tribulation truly comes, but at the time it was expected to come rather soon. So they aren't going out to the world here, like the Matthew 28 extension will say, but we'll not go that far. Verses 34 to 35, think not that I am come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword. For I am come to set a man at variance against his father, and the daughter against her mother, and the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. So again, you're having conflict within the nation about whether Messiah has come and whether these people are preaching in his name. I think that's the context that you have coming up to this verse here. Just to show you again, here's the whole chapter. I'm obviously not reading the whole thing. I picked some things out here and there in order to give us an idea of what's going on. So I think this has to do with as the apostles go out and they witness and preach, they are to be taken in by some that I think it said are worthy at the top of the chapter and that will treat them kindly. And if no one will, then basically shake the dust off your feet and go elsewhere. And they're to be as they go into the tribulation, the persecution will become strong. Okay, so I think that's what this passage is about, and we're going to see what Mark has to say before we go on to the other Matthew 25. So, anybody, any questions or comments before I go on to Mark?
I'm good.
So, Mark has something very similar, but it's in a different context than what we saw in Matthew. In Matthew, we're in the chapter where the apostles are sent out, they're commissioned. Let's go see what's going on in Mark 9, because Mark 9 is pretty far down. You're at the transfiguration. And Jesus is going to start teaching about his death. So this is well after the commission of the 12. We'll see here it's basically here. It's towards the end of the chapter. So let's go see what it says. It has some things in common, but some stuff that's different. So Mark 9:38-41. And John answered him, saying, Master, we saw one casting out devils in thy name, and he followeth not us, and we forbade him, because he followeth not us. But Jesus said, Forbid him not, for there is no man which shall do a miracle in my name that can lightly speak evil of me. For he that is not against us is on our part. For whosoever shall give you a cup of water to drink in my name, because ye belong to Christ, verily I say unto you, he shall not lose his reward. Now, the thing that's interesting about this one, I do have the little paragraph markers here. It seems like, well, something new is beginning here, because I got a paragraph symbol on the verse 41. But the way the verses are grouped here, this one seems to be grouped with the rest of that. And then it continues on with and, so I don't know, maybe that should be down with the rest of this. And he talks about entering into the kingdom. I'm going to put up a verse about that in a minute. But let's go see what the rest of the context of this is, because it is very different from Matthew. So just before this, verses 35 to 37, and he sat down and called the 12 and saith unto them, If any man desire to be first, the same shall be last of all and servant of all. And he took a child and set him in the midst of them. And when he had taken him in his arms, he said unto them, Whosoever shall receive one of such children in my name receiveth me, and whosoever shall receive me receiveth not me, but him that sent me. Now, I do believe that Jesus has a real child in his midst here, and that child it's symbolizing something in what he's teaching, and that is the church is typically referred to as little children. So I think that it's a real child there, but he's really talking about the church and receiving the church. So if you went and looked at little children as a phrase in the New Testament, it's going to occur in John a lot. My little children, I run into you, little children. I run into you, little children, and so forth. First John is a book to the church, trying to recognize who's in the church and who's not. So I'm not going to get too hung up on that. But when Jesus is talking about little children here, I'll agree that yes, there's a child there, but he's really talking about the church here and receiving the church. But yes, there is focus on treating children correctly or properly. Right after this, and this is the one I started to mention, he goes back to the little children, verses 35 to 37. I can't point to it with my hand, but what I'm moving the cursor on, this passage is preceded by the one that's below it, where he talks about a little child, and then these next verses goes right back to the children again. So Mark 9:42, and whoever shall offend one of these little ones that believe in me, it is better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck and he were cast into the sea. And then there's talking about the fire that's never quenched, but I'll skip over that and just say in verse 47, and if thine eye offend thee, pluck it out. It is better for thee to enter into the kingdom of God with one eye than having two eyes to be cast into hellfire. The only thing I'm highlighting there is he's talking about the Jews getting into the kingdom. The focus here is still Israel. The apostles are only meant to go to Israel, and so that's what, to me, that's what the context around this passage about giving the cup of water is about, how the Jews are being treated as the kingdom is on its way, and basically what the tribulation is doing is separating the believers from the unbelievers. That's God's desire with the tribulation. So while this passage has a much different context than Matthew, I still think the general principle is the same. It's about Israel and it's about the church and how the people are being treated by one another. Jesus says, I'm going to bring division, and that division is going to cause some conflict. And those that treat the church, the believers, well, will be rewarded. I think that's the point of the teaching. So I'm going to show something in Luke here, which doesn't have the passage about the cup of water, but it's going to talk about doing miracles and following Christ. So jump in if you got a comment. So I put Mark up here just to have Luke compare to it. Luke 9, verse 48 to 50. And he said unto them, Whosoever shall receive this child in my name receiveth me, and whosoever shall receive me receiveth him that sent me. For he that is least among you all, the same shall be great. And John answered and said, Master, we saw one casting out devils in thy name, and we forbade him, because he followeth not with us. And Jesus said unto them, Forbid him not, for he that is not against us is for us. So again, Luke does not have this cup of water verse at all, but where Mark has it, Luke has a similar passage. And the whole point is, not everyone is following Jesus as closely as the apostles and many of the other disciples, but basically he said, if they're not against me, then they're for me. And all this is about division. And if the church, the believers are going to be treated properly, then there'll be a reward, I think is what the context of this passage is about. So anybody, any questions or comments? Or I go off to Matthew 25.
The context was what, Tom?
The context is how Israel's treating one another, particularly with focus on how the believers are treated.
Oh, okay.
Now, what I can't really comment on, so if someone isn't a believer and he treats the believers well, is he going to hell? And there won't be any reward. So the problem with Israel's program is it possible to be saved yet not go into the kingdom? And I'm not going to address that here because I don't have a good answer anyway. So what would it mean to get a reward if you're, and I think it might be more so for how the believers are treating one another, because there are a number of scriptures that talk about that. You need to forgive your brother. Well, why? Well, there's obviously some kind of conflict. So it may only be applicable to believers to receive a reward. And you got to take care of one another is the general instruction. It's the tribulation is going to be tough and you're going to need each other to get through it.
Right.
Even if that is true, that those people didn't know that they were saved. They only knew they were saved was because Jesus said, when you did these things to them, to the least of me, you did it to me. So I bled.
Well, that's the sheep and goats judgment. That's not here. We haven't talked about that yet. That's Gentiles. That's not here. So we're going to see that. That's why I'm saying we need to see the context of this, and this is very different context from the other one, which we're going to come to next. There is a similarity in it in terms of how the believers are being treated. But one has to do with how are Jews treating their fellow Jews, and the other one has to do with how Gentiles are treating the Jews. And that's going to involve salvation for the Gentile.
Would you say it's pretty harsh for the Gentiles and Jews, and then the Jews on Jews? Or how would you say that?
Well, let me just say that what we're talking about here concerns believers and how they're treating other believers, because I don't want to try to get into what might be confusing. But there's a reward associated with how they're doing Jesus's business while he's away. There's a number of parables that talk about how his servants stand before him and give account, and talents and pounds, depending on whether it's Matthew or Luke, and getting more reward. You're going to reign over cities. So there is a service going on in Jesus's absence, and their reward is determined by their behavior while he's gone. And I think that's what this is talking about here. Okay. For the Gentiles, it's about salvation. Well, we got to go through the Matthew 25 in order to understand that. But that's not what's going on here. This isn't about salvation. This is about reward. Now, you can say salvation is a reward, yeah, but we're not talking about this reward as salvation here. Okay, why don't we do the Matthew 25 one, and then if we want to come back and banter these, we can. But there is a similarity in terms of treatment. But that's why I think the context of the two is very different. I would not apply these to Matthew 25, and I would not take Matthew 25 and come try to explain these verses. Okay, so again, to give some context, what we're going to go through in Matthew 25 is not in Mark and Luke. What you have in Matthew 24 is Jesus is going to talk about his return. And this is basically kind of the tribulation chapter, the coming of the Son of Man. And no one knows the day or the hour. And of course, people today can't discern. They can't rightly divide prophecy from mystery. And they think the rapture's in here. And you couldn't be more wrong. The people that are left behind survive. The people that are taken don't go to heaven. they are destroyed. So I don't really want to go into that, but that's what's in Matthew 24. Matthew 25 is going to talk about something that was addressed in the end of Matthew 24, and that is who is the good and faithful servant, or the wise and faithful servant, I meant. Who then is the faithful and wise servant? Well, when you go into Matthew 25, the wise servants are talked about in the parable of the 10 virgins. The faithful servants are talked about in the parable of the talents, and this is the one I was talking about, how the servants are being rewarded when Jesus returns. Okay? But what you have after that is the what they call the final judgment here, and it's typically called the sheep and goats judgment. From a chronological respect, Jesus has returned at the beginning of Matthew 25, because it says the bridegroom cometh and they go to meet him. So Jesus has returned, and he's judging the servants of Israel in the two parables. And then he's going to judge the Gentiles here, and that's what this passage is about. So Jesus has returned, and I would say basically the bowls of wrath have been poured out on the nations that came against Jesus in Jerusalem in Armageddon. But that's not really in here. It's in Revelation. So,
Excuse me, Tom, could I say something?
Yep.
Sorry about joining late, but I hear part of it. So in this Bible study you have, and I was listening to it. So this right here, what you're talking about tonight, this is about people in the body of Christ being saved, right? That already, this righteous, that already surrendered their life. And is this also talking about people who's not saved too? I'm just trying to catch up. That's all.
All right, so I won't spend long, but I'll give you a little bit of how we got started. So Ryan asked some questions a few weeks ago, and they got tabled for me finishing up some other things. And so there was a question about these two verses in Matthew talking about a cup of water here, cup of cold water here, and giving me a drink. Are these talking about the same thing? And so forth.
Okay, gotcha.
Now, all of these passages have to do with Israel. The dispensation of grace is not in the picture in Jesus's ministry. It's a secret that no one knows about. Independent of that, it still has nothing to do with us. Obviously, the earlier chapters of Jesus's ministry happened in the past, and the future things that he prophesied never came to be, and they're still in the future. But we have nothing to do with any of those things.
Okay.
So when the dispensation of grace is over and the church goes up, those that are alive go up, and those that are resurrected, get their new bodies. We're gone off the earth, and Jesus is going to pour out the wrath on Israel and then the people that come against him at the end of the tribulation. So that's kind of what we're talking about here in the Matthew 25 passage. Okay. So this is an all Israel thing here. And when the nations are involved, it's still about Israel and the prophecy program. So, all right. So in chapter 25, verses 31 to 33, I broke it up a little bit. It doesn't really all fit on the slide. So when the Son of Man shall come in his glory and all the holy angels with him, then shall he sit upon the throne of his glory. So Jesus is returned, and he's setting up his reign, and he's going to start with getting all that offend out of the kingdom. He did that with Israel already. That was what was at the beginning of the chapter. And now he's going to deal with the Gentiles. When the kingdom starts, there's not a lost person on the earth. And that it won't remain that way as time goes by, but it'll start out with everybody being saved. Just like when the ark landed, we'll say there were 8 saved people on the earth, and it went south from there. But verse 32, and before him shall be gathered all nations, and he shall separate them one from another, as a shepherd divideth his sheep from the goats. And he shall set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on the left. Now, this is the only place in Scripture that I know that Gentiles are referred to as sheep. Sheep is typically a symbol of Israel, and what you can say here, these guys are considered sheep because they're going to be saved as a result of dealing with Israel, as we will see. And the goats are typically associated with the scapegoat. They would have 2 goats. One would be freed, and I think the other one would be killed. Something in the Old Testament, Exodus. All right, so that's the situation here, and he's going to deal with the sheep first. Verses 34 to 40. Then shall the king say unto them on his right hand, Come, ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. and this is a key phrase here, from the foundation of the world. That means we're talking about prophecy. Since Adam and Eve fell, God has had a plan of making a kingdom where people will be blessed, and because of what people did, I'll say after Babel, God had to go and raise up a nation out of Abraham and get Israel straightened out first so that he could bring this blessing. But God has had a kingdom in mind from the beginning, and that's what this foundation of the world, from the foundation of the world, really means. Verse 35, for I was an hungered, and you gave me meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. Naked, and ye clothed me. I was sick, and ye visited me. I was in prison, and ye came unto me. Now, my general comment is this has the same theme of what we saw earlier in Matthew about how did you treat me? But we're talking about how did a Gentile treat the Jew versus how did a Jew treat a Jew in these two passages. Verse 37, then shall the righteous answer him, saying, Lord, when saw we thee and hungered and fed thee, or thirsty and gave thee drink? When saw we thee a stranger and took thee in, or naked and clothed thee? Or when saw we thee sick or in prison and came unto thee? And the king shall answer and say unto them, verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me. Now, one thing is, this tells you the state of Israel in the tribulation. They're naked and hungry and in prison and sick. This is the state of the nation, and this is how the Gentiles are choosing to treat them. My best example is the movie Schindler's List. If you saw that, you saw how the guy Schindler in the German, Hitler's empire, if you want to call it that, as he's trying to take over Europe and the world, Schindler's trying to help the Jew, and he's going all out in order to do it. Most of the the Germans are treating the Jews rather badly. So Schindler would be probably part of a small number that would be, as a type, be going into the kingdom. Now, that wasn't going on. That was during the dispensation of grace. That's not what's going on here. The dispensation of grace is over. This isn't Schindler's List, but that's a good example of protecting the Jew and providing for them. Okay, so basically Jesus says, the way you treated my brethren is the way you were treating me. And this is what the Abrahamic blessing is all about. I will bless those that bless you. I will curse those that curse you. So these are the ones that blessed Israel, and they're going to enter into the kingdom. And we'll see at the last verse, they will have everlasting life. All right, so the remainder is the goats, verses 41 to 46. Then shall he say also unto them on the left hand, depart from me, ye cursed, into everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was an hungered, and ye gave me no meat. I was thirsty, and ye gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and ye took me not in, naked, and ye clothed me not, sick and in prison, and ye visited me not. Then shall they also answer him, saying, Lord, when saw we thee an hungered, or thirst, or stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not minister unto thee? Then shall he answer them, saying, verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye did it not to one of the least of these, ye did it not to me. And these shall go away into everlasting punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. And this is how a Gentile enters into the kingdom. It's not through the gospel of grace, won't work. It's not through the gospel of the kingdom. It's not for them. It's through, and I don't know if this is the everlasting gospel that's talked about in Revelation 14, but this is how they get it, and it's the Abrahamic blessing. So, is there a similarity between the cup of cold water and what's mentioned here? I'll say yes, there's some similarity. It's how you're treating the Jew. In the first case, it's how the Jew treats his brother, and in the second case, it's how the Gentile treats the Jew. So, I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments. Clear as mud. Don't care. We won't be here.
What?
Yes?
No. So you said how the Jews, how they're gonna treat the other Jews, and what timeline is that? During what, tribulation?
That's during the tribulation, and when Jesus returns, he's going to reward the servants. And if they were treating one another kindly, if you go and read this one in the parable of the talents, Yeah, the wicked and slothful servant. There's another one that says that he's beating his brethren. I don't. It might not be in this one, but they're not treating each other well, and it's because Jesus is tarrying so long. They're expecting him to come back, and he's not coming back, and times are getting tough. The end of the tribulation is going to be far worse than the beginning. So there's some parables that talk about that, and the whole point is you need to be wise and faithful, and you need to do all that Jesus commanded, and the reward will reflect how they did. They got to endure to the end. Endure in the word is what that really means. Now, for
So
the
this is
Gentile, it's a different matter, but
so this is gonna be like believing Jews, how believing Jews treats the unbelieving or believing Jews or the Jews in general.
well, it's kind of tough to say. There'll be some, like we see in the parable of the 10 virgins. I think we talked about that some other week. But
Yeah.
they're gonna say, Lord, open up, let us in. He goes, I knew you not. And there's some other passages that say, didn't we do all these marvelous works in your name? He says, I never knew you. So I can't fully explain all those, but there's going to be people standing before Jesus when he's returned, and they're going to be judged, and some will be rewarded and some will be punished. Now, is that punishment eternal damnation, or is it just being out of the kingdom? I'm still struggling with that myself. But
I
they are
remember
called servants. All of Israel are called servants.
I remember in First John, John did talk about how there were some false teachers that came into the world and that they will be judged.
Yes.
I think that was kind of what that does tie into what Jesus was talking about. Those were the people he was talking about.
Yeah. So what First John is about how to recognize the believing Jew. And I think one of them says that they have to acknowledge that Christ has already come. And of course, the unbelieving Jew is going to deny that Jesus has come, and they're going to think that the Antichrist. I'm not sure if is it in maybe chapter 5. But anyway, when I what was that word I searched for before? Oh yeah, little children. Um, I guess it's in several different chapters, but basically, what that book is about is how to identify who's the believer or not. The whole parable of the wheat and the tares, which we're going to go over on Sunday, is you can't tell the wheat and the tares apart. They both look the same, but you're going to be able to tell them apart through the instructions in First John. And so
Right.
obviously we're not really going through that book, but that's what they're going to try to determine in order to survive. Because if the unbelieving Jew realizes you're a believing Jew, you might get turned into the Antichrist, or that's why it says you're going to be persecuted and imprisoned and treated badly. Some of that is in foreign, in among the Gentiles, and some of that is in Israel itself, or whatever the Antichrist kingdom, however big that is. All right. Anyone else?
Good.
Now, I won't go into it too long. I talked about this at FBC once. The everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels, that's the lake of fire, and that doesn't exist yet. That gets created when Jesus returns, and there's a number of scriptures that are scattered. Some of them are in Revelation, talk about the lake of fire. That's not prepared yet, and people say the lake of fire is already there. Well, I'm sorry, it's not. God doesn't need a lake of fire yet. He has hell. Hell's a temporary place. And then the lake of fire will be the permanent place, and eventually the hell will be cast into the lake of fire. But that's going to be prepared when Jesus returns, because it's going to be time to start throwing some of the devils in there. Most of the devils are in heaven at this time. The ones that died during the flood are in hell, and they've been let out. They'll be let out during the tribulation. And it'll be time for them to go into this lake of fire. So it's really prepared for the devils, but there will be many a mortal who has died that will join them there, unfortunately. All right. I'll call this one over and we'll do the next one, but anybody, any final comments? You certainly can go wrestle with that some more, but I think the context around them makes them different situations, but there is a similarity to them if you want there to be.
Okay.
All right.